Christ must be kept the center of the book. It is ultimately a revelation of Jesus himself. All right, so the next section, what is the purpose of the book of Revelation? Now, you know what I'm doing in my study today? This is an introduction. My comments are dealing with verse 1 through 8, and that's about it. So if you look under the purpose of the book, and someone here in a minute is going to read John 14:29, Revelation 1:1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants things which must shortly take place. Now that tells you right there that the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecies of Revelation was imminent. Now before I go any farther, and I'm sure that between myself, Pastor Ross, Pastor Brumman, and others that may teach, there'll be some repetition, which is good. When you approach Revelation, there are three principal views. You got past, present, future. You've got one that is called the preterist view. Just think of the word pre. They think that all of Revelation was fulfilled by the time the apostles died, first 100 years. They think Nero was the Antichrist. And they've got kind of a creative way to try to make that work. I don't think it's very effective because there's a lot of revelation, like when it talks about Jesus coming, that clearly hasn't happened. And so I don't accept that. That's not a very popular view. Then you've got a popular view, and it's a new view. It's called the futurist view. And they say that from Revelation chapter 4 onward, in Revelation 4, it says, I heard a voice behind me, and there's a trumpet, and it says, come up hither. And John is kind of taken up and shown this vision. They say all of that is from the rapture on. So they say everything from chapter 4 in Revelation is still future. Well, that I would respectfully disagree with. And that is a relatively new view that was actually developed by two Jesuit priests, Francisco Ribera being one of them. And it was later adopted by Scofield, and he put it in his Scofield Bible, that was picked up by then Hal Lindsey, who put it in the book Late Great Planet Earth when he foretold the end of the world in 1988, and none of it happened. But it took hold. The secret rapture futuristic view took hold at that point, and they never let go of it. Then you got the view that was the view of the reformers, which is called the historist view. And that means Revelation really is a panorama that covers the history of the church between the first coming. Jesus said the time is at hand. It starts now till the second coming. You get to the end of the book, and all things are restored. And so Revelation is for God's people in every age. And every lesson for every age is for every person. The 7 messages to the 7 churches are not just to those particular churches in history, but every individual sort of goes through sometimes phases of Ephesus, Smyrna, Philadelphia, Laodicea, Sardis, so forth. Persons first converted, they're Ephesus, and they get persecuted by their family. Smyrna, they join a church. Philadelphia, brotherly love. Then they've been in the church for a while. Laodicea. And so it's for every Christian, but it really does cover the panorama of church history. And so we'll be sharing in this series the historist view. All right, so the main purpose of the book is redemption. Now read for me, please, John 14, verse 29.
John 14, verse 29. And now I have told you before it comes, that when it does come to pass, you may believe.
All right, so God gives us prophecy so we will know how to invest in the stock market, or how to pick lotto numbers, or how to plant our crops. Well, there was a place where God gave prophecy to Joseph to tell him how to plant his crops, right? But typically prophecy is best understood looking backwards. God does not give us prophecy so that we can say the end is coming, let's go run for the hills, let's dig a hole, let's hide. He gives us prophecy so that when the prophecies come true, our faith grows. Hey, God saw this all coming. Prophecy is typically best understood looking backwards. Now, some of the prophets, they can look ahead and tell you exactly what's going to happen. If you believe them, you'll benefit from that. But you know, most of my faith comes from the prophecies that have been fulfilled. My faith is strengthened that all things are in God's hands. I realize God is never in heaven worried. He knows exactly what's going to happen. That gives me peace, that my life is in his hands. He knows what's coming, that what he said will happen. And so when I look at how God works in the prophecies, it's redemptive. Prophecy is principally redemptive. The book of Revelation is a book of salvation. It's a gospel book. It is not a prognostication book. It is not a big book of fortune cookies. It's a book of salvation. There is a lot of prophecy in there that came true, but don't think of prophecy as, hoo, I've got an inside track on what's coming. Prophecy is there so that as we preach prophecy, people say, wow, God knows all things. And he wins in the end. That's the wonderful thing about Revelation, is that the final chapter tells us you know who wins. And that really says a lot right there. John 13:19, Jesus said, now I tell you before it comes to pass, that when it does come to pass, that you might believe that I am he. Why does he tell us? That we might believe that he is the one. Prophecy is to help us recognize Jesus as the one. Look at John 16:4. But these things I've told you, that when the time comes, you might remember that I told you of them. God wants us to have more faith, and prophecy does that. Isaiah 46, verse 9. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times, things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel will stand and I will do all my pleasure. The prophecies in the Bible are telling us that God sees all things. So one of the principal purposes of the book is to tell us that Christ is coming, that he's coming soon. Chapter 1, these things must shortly take place. That means imminently. Revelation 22, surely I come quickly. Everybody in every age can read Revelation and know that some part of it applies to them, their age in which they live. And you might say Revelation begins where the gospel ends with Jesus. Gospels end with Jesus. Revelation begins with Jesus. It's talking about his resurrection and his ascension to heaven. The primary purpose of this is to remind us that God is in control. Now here's one of the most important sections. It's talking about the symbolic language of Revelation. Touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to give you some examples.